Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, As-salatu was-salamu ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal-mursaleen, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa ahli baytihi wa man ittaba' sunnati ajma'in. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Today, inshallah, by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will discuss Surah AlMuminun. Surah AlMuminun is the 74th surah or chapter revealed in the Quran in the sequence of revelation. And today it is at the 18th chapter position. It is 23rd position in the chapter of recitation in the Quran, and at the 18th juz, the para, what we call, or separa in the Urdu. It is all Makki's chapter, and it was revealed in the last days of Prophet's presence in Mecca. And there are a few important things about this chapter. There are many things have been mentioned, as in every chapter there is a sequence of information. This surah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about the character of a mu'min. Mu'min is the higher level of a faith. In other words, first there's a person is a Muslim, and then they become mu'min, and that is where the high level comes. And in Quran, everything is about mu'min. God says everything successful, blessings, peace, and everything is for the mu'min. So there are about first 10 verses of the Quran. Prophet ﷺ said that in the first verse was he would recite after. This is the hadith from Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He says, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he received this wahi or revelation, he would hear like the honeybees buzzing sound around Prophet. And after that, Prophet would turn his face towards the Qibla and raise his hands up in the air, and he would make the supplication, Allahumma zidna wa la tanqisna wa akrimna wa la tahna wa atana wa la tahrimna wa atharna wa la tu'athir alayna wa arid anna. Okay, which means that, oh Allah, increase us, do not make us less in numbers, and give us honor and not dishonor us or disgrace us, and give us whatever we are not deprived, what we have not received, and do not deprive us from what your mercy, and give us superiority over others, and do not give others, means non-believers, superiority over believers, and be pleased with us. And after that, he would recite these first 10 verses of Surah AlMuminun. And this is the hadith from Rawa al-Hakim fi Sahih an Abi Bakr Qatbi. And then also the second verse, which means الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَوَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would perform salah and come to read this ayah, he would raise his eyes over to the sky. So these are the two references of the significance of revelation of these verses. Along with that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also have mentioned in these first 10 verses about the creation of the human. Also in this chapter, I mean, not just in this 10 verses. It is also in this chapter mentioned about the story of the Hud alayhi salam, whose nation was Ad, and they were destroyed because of their disbelief and denying of the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The people who are the one who used to carve mountains and build homes, and they were pretty strong and huge nation. Giant people, basically, to speak. Then also in this chapter it is mentioned Allah has not charged or stressed any nation or any soul more than it can bear, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also guide to repel evil with the goodness. If somebody does bad to you, do not do bad to them in response. Always, in other words, two bads don't make one right. So repel the evil with the goodness. Then also on the doomsday, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will appear if the life of this world was less than a day. This is some of the things which is people do not realize. Those who are loving in the worldly life, for them this life is everything. Actually, this is very temporary, and compared to the end life, which will be eternal, because death will be abolished at that time. And then the final thing in this mention is that the disbeliever, those who deny Allah, disbelieve is the denying of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. These people will never be getting into the paradise. So Prophet mentioned a very important thing about these 10 attributes, and he says that whoever does this will enter the Firdaus al-A'la. That person will get into the Jannat al-Firdaus al-A'la, those who have these attributes in their personality. And these are at least about 8 attributes of a believer is mentioned. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this thing. So let's begin with the chapter. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح المؤمنون.
In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, success is really attained by the believers.
الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون.
Who concentrate their attention in humbleness when offering salah, prayers.
والذين هم عن اللغو معرضون.
And who keep themselves away from vain things.
والذين هم للزكاة فاعلون.
And who are performers of zakah.
والذين هم لفروجهم حافظون.
And who guard their private parts.
إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين.
Except from their wives or from those bondwomen who are owned by their hands, as they are not to be blamed.
فمن ابتغى وراء ذلك فأولئك هم العادون.
However, those who seek sexual pleasure beyond that are the transgressors.
والذين هم لأماناتهم وعهدهم راعون.
And success is attained by those who honestly look after their trusts and covenant.
والذين هم على صلواتهم يحافظون.
And who consistently observe their prayers.
أولئك هم الوارثون.
Those are the inheritors.
الذين يرثون الفردوس هم فيها خالدون.
Who will inherit Firdaus, the paradise? They will be there forever.
ولقد
So in the first 10 verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described about 7-8 attributes of a believer. First attribute is that, first Allah saying the success is for those who are mu'min. Indeed, successful are those who are believers of the mu'min level, not just a Muslim level. Mu'min is a little higher person, and that is what the Quran is talking about, the worldly and hereafter success. And this is, the first thing is that they are guarding, and they are very humble in their prayer. They are showing humbleness, means they are very attentive. Second thing about is that when they are humble, but they are also guardian, as is in the verse number 9, it says. So these are the two parts. One is to have a prayer guarding, performing, in other words, performing prayer in time, going into mosque for the men, for women to be home, and even privately when they are not able to go to mosque, 5 times prayer must be performed. As we can see in Islam, one time we say Shahada, we become Muslim. Then we perform Hajj only when we can physically and financially afford it. So that's not absolute requirement. Then we come to the fasting, people who are able to fast, otherwise they can give fidya. Or even they perform this fasting in the different days when the women are pregnant with the babies. And then so that is also not so absolute. And zakat is the paying alms and charity only for those who have wealth. So the only thing which is prayer from the beginning of Islam till the death to bed, a Muslim, wherever they are conscious and able, salah is most important. And salah, just not salah, but timing and the humbleness in there. Then the third thing is that they avoid from the vainful talks. The vain things are basically anything which is not beneficial. In Islam, Muslims is in a trade constantly from birth to death with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything we do, we get the reward. What we not do, or we disobey Allah, we are our prophet, we are in a direct confrontation. But then there are vainful things which do not benefit or cause us to gain anything, and that is something like we are being on certain social media or things which are wasteful or gossiping or just spending time in the thing which are not beneficial. So Muslim is actually in a constant conscience trade with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي الزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ, and وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ, these are the people who pay the alms and charity from the money when they have, or even sadaqah. Zakat is also referred for that, sadaqah, taking care of the people, which is little whatever you can. And then وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ, and then they guard their private parts, means they do not go obscene and they do not do fornication. إِلَّا عَلَىٰ أَزْوَاجِهِمْ, except their spouse or they have right hand possessed. This is about this bondwoman or slave. This is more detailed. We'll come to the Surah Nisa, we'll talk about it in a detail. But there are two types of bondwomen, or the slaves women were dealt in Quran mentioned. One was the women who would come with their spouses in the battlefield to give them morale, bring the kids in the battlefield so that their husband will fight aggressively to protect their country. And this is a punishment which Islam has for the prisoner of war. Those women who are not killed, they are being taken as a slave. But this was only applicable in the life of Prophet. After Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu put the prisoner or the salary of the soldiers, this thing was abolished. And since then, it was not allowed that any person who is becoming a prisoner of war, man or woman, were property of the state, and then they were released after taking ransom, or they were sold into the slavery for other. That was a tradition practice in those days. At today's world, it is not being practiced. So, but in Islamic Sharia, there is a whole inheritance rule about the slave children that born out of these women who are in slavery. The reason people ask why this so in American world, young people do not comprehend it. As we see in today, what they did in Abu Ghraib grave to the Muslims women, they were not slaves of war. They were basically good Muslim, and what they raped and insulted them and humiliated the people. Islam does not allow that. And these people, basically in those days, there was no way to provide resources for them. So those people, whoever the man, if he killed a man and then his family was there, that family will become his possession. And then the women were kept as a slave to work, and in return they were given all the rights of family. And many times Muslims were killed by those women. They poisoned them or they hurt them, and their kids were raised by these men. So Muslim men were basically risking their life to keep them in their home with their own family. So it was kind of a risk Muslims have to take. But Quran says that if they have a relation with these women without marriage, and that is allowed only in this situation. The other thing was that if once a child is born of this bondwoman, then they become free. That is, their mothers become now free. They are no more slaves. The other thing is about there's some family used to raise the daughters and they sell them, the children, boys also. And those people were sold in the market, or they were kidnapped or hijacked or whatnot, and then they were taken out. Like Yusuf alayhi salam was kidnapped and was sold in the Egyptian bazaar. He was a prophet of Allah. So that's what happened to the slavery also. So there were two types of slaves: the prisoner of war slave, or the slave who were bought. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that who is born free of any bondage from their mother's womb cannot be enslaved by any other man. So Islam abolished slavery by using these examples, and every time a person would do a mistake and error, Prophet would tell them to free the slave. And that's how the Islam freed the people. And it was not just an Islamic practice, it was a practice done by all over the world. And still there are places where they do the bondage and selling people, and we don't have the scope of this discussion is beyond that. So then for 7th verse it says, فَمَنْ ابْتَغَى وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْعَادُونَ, means whoever goes transgression, doing anything above and beyond this, having a extramarital or fornication relation, that is transgressing the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that person should be punished according to Sharia law. There are two types of punishment. If an unmarried person commits this act, they are given 100 lashes, and they are supposed to be married and leave the town. And if a married person commits that sin, that has to be stoned. And if nobody knows about it, there's no need to speak about it and keep it quiet and do the Hajj and seek the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and abstain from such sinful action. And then the next verse 8 says, وَالَّذِينَ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ رَعُونَ, and those who have their trust and covenant. There are two parts, trust and a covenant. When they make when they are given a trust, they should maintain the trust, and when they are given covenant, they make covenant, they should live by that covenant, and who constantly observe their prayer. That's what we mentioned earlier. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْوَارِثُونَ, these are the people who are the inheritor. الَّذِينَ يَرِثُونَ الْفِرْدَوْسَ. Now this is the highest level of Jannah, which is mentioned. There are 7 grades of Jannah, and this is the highest Jannah, which is under the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ, and they will be there forever and ever. So there's no end to their life, and this is what they will be living forever and ever.